Welcome to Rooted with Bodhi. I'm your host, Emmy Mathis, Bodhi's co-director and founding healer. Today, we will be exploring the power of the vagus nerve and how we can work with it to restore our roots to wholeness. I'm joined by Bonnie Thompson and Kristi Rimbach, who will share their insights on how to use the vagus nerve to heal, reframe our experiences, and reconnect to a state of balance and vitality. Tune in for an honest and intimate conversation that will expand your awareness of the power of co-regulation, connection, and how that allows our body to heal. Okay. Well, welcome to Rooted with Bodhi. It is my extreme pleasure to have Kristi and Bonnie here today to talk with us a little bit about themselves and their practices and the vagus nerve, which I'm super excited about. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm just going to introduce y'all. So we've got Kristi Joy Rimbach is a healing touch practitioner and instructor with 30 years of experience in the healing arts and meditation. Bonnie Thompson has been a healing touch and energy medicine practitioner since 2006. Kristi and Bonnie began teaching classes together on polyvagal theory as it applies to energy medicine in 2018. They are the creators of a 5-week course for energy medicine practitioners called Healing Through the Vagus Nerve, which I took and was absolutely amazing. The course combines the science of polyvagal theory and trauma together with a subtle energy perspective. Participants learn how to support nervous system regulation with clients through education and simple, effective techniques that can be incorporated into healing sessions right away. And I do have to say that I used some of those techniques yesterday in a session. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Would it be okay to maybe dive right into talking a little bit about the vagus nerve? Would that be okay?
Yeah, if
Well,
you have a little slideshow presentation just to kind of give your audience the basics if they're not familiar with
Yeah.
it, to give some
Yeah.
context.
Yeah, that would be
So,
great.
so I think Bonnie, you have it, so she would
I
just need to be able
do.
to share screen.
Let's see. There we go. And I'm going to have to start. Perfect. Okay, so healing through the vagus nerve is our deal. So the vagus nerve, why do we even care about it? We care because dysregulation of that leads to physical, mental, emotional, behavioral, and relationship problems. It affects every aspect of your life. And our modern way of living and our cultural norms have a profound effect on how our vagus nerve is functioning. And so understanding how it works can greatly improve our outcomes. So what is the vagus nerve? So this is a nerve that it's cranial nerve 10. That means it comes from our brain stem and goes down through our body and innervates or touches into almost every organ in our body, including the middle ear. It goes all over. So it's has a profound effect on every system in our body. So it's also about connection. So when you've heard about the gut-brain axis or connection, that's the vagus nerve. That is the nerve that sends that information between the gut and the brain. It's also the heart-brain connection. It's also involved in how we connect to other people and to ourselves. So it's all about connection. You remember that word. So the vagus is the longest nerve, biggest nerve in the body. And as soon after it leaves the brainstem, it breaks into two branches. And we call it the dorsal vagus branch, which goes down through, touches into our heart and lungs, moves down through the diaphragm, and touches into, again, almost everything in the lower abdomen. And we call it the old vagus because this developed way back in evolutionary time first. And we have it in common with reptiles, actually. They really didn't develop much more than their dorsal vagus. So The ventral vagus, so that's the other branch of the vagus nerve. This is we call it the new vagus because this developed later in evolutionary time. And it's something that's unique to mammals, and it's involved in our ability to connect with each other and with other people and find our tribes that we can be safe with and help each other. And that is more involved in that, like I mentioned, the middle ear going up into the head, but it also touches into the heart and the lungs, but does not go down past the diaphragm. And this ventral vagus is very much involved with when you hear about rest and digest, this is what's supporting that process. So what we used to think of with the autonomic nervous system was that it was the sympathetic and parasympathetic split into two. And the sympathetic is like our fight flight part, and then the parasympathetic was that rest digest and more of that calm aspect. And then what we have since learned in more recent science, thanks to Dr. Stephen Porges, is that parasympathetic part is kind of broken down into two different nervous system functions and states, and it's all managed by the vagus nerve. So most of the parasympathetic nervous system is the vagus nerve, but that upper part of the vagus is more involved with our ability to connect with other people, to engage socially. That's why you don't have social engagement with your reptiles. They just don't do that. And then the dorsal vagus, which is connected with and manages our shutdown freeze response. So that's basic idea. So what this looks like, or how our body uses these three different states. I like this example of impalas, and they're kind of like us in the sense that they come together in groups. They survive in groups. So they're relaxed, they're doing their thing, they're finding something to eat, but along comes a predator, and their nervous system will kick into that sympathetic mode, that flight mode in their case, because fighting that predator is not going to work for them instantaneously. And the thing about this is we have no control over which system our body decides to use. So for the impalas, they're going to kick into this high sympathetic energy and be fleeing away from this predator. If they get caught, they're going to move into that dorsal vagus shutdown response, where their body again just takes over and does this. It's kind of like the opossum playing dead. They're not actually playing dead. Their body just does this. And it's a good thing because it numbs them so they're not feeling so much pain. But it's also a survival strategy because sometimes they look dead and the predator will drop them and maybe move away, or if something comes in to try to take it from them, they'll get distracted, and that impala, if its nervous system perceives there's an opening to get out of there, it'll pop up and take off. So we'll assume that this little impala managed that and was able to make his way back to somewhere safe. And its body will go through a process usually of like shaking to shake off all of that really high sympathetic energy and shutdown energy that was happening in its body. And then it'll find its way back to its herd. And no negative long-term effects no trauma from this necessarily, because it allows itself to move through this flow. So that's kind of what it looks like. Um, and we experience a similar process when we're feeling safe and connected up here in that social engagement, the green thing, and something pops up that our nervous system thinks is danger. It will go into some kind of mobilization. It'll go into that fight flight response. So you'll get hyped up, um, and we tend to want to move with that. If it's something that feels life-threatening and or that's perceived as life-threatening, again, by your nervous system, it's not your brain, not your thinking head that's going there. You're going to move into this shutdown freeze state that's managed by that dorsal branch of the vagus nerve. So, oh, just briefly too, just want to say when we come out of this, we make our way back the same way we went in. And you'll notice there's not a direct from that social engagement down to shutdown because there's always going to be this zoom into that mobilized energy before we go in there. And it can be very quick, but it's going to hold, we're going to have this energy in our body as well. All right. I'm going to turn it over to you, Kristi.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of things you said because they were so important. One is that our nervous system makes these choices for us. And that's so important to know, as far as understanding why we feel and behave the way we do, and for self-compassion, understanding that we don't have a choice on what state our nervous system moves us into. We have choices after that, but we don't have a choice initially. So that's so important to remember. And the other thing is, let's see, could you go back one slide? Because I'm losing it. Oh, it's what our nervous system perceives as a threat. And I know you kind of highlighted that word, but I just wanted to talk about that a little bit more. It's not necessarily what is actually happening, or it's not necessarily something that actually is a danger. It's what we perceive as a danger. I mean, and that could be something as innocuous as an email can feel like a life threat, or an assessment, being assessed at work. There's so many things that can feel like a threat to our nervous system and cause us to go into one of these defense states. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about what each of these states feels like and looks like, because where the choice comes in for us is when we recognize where our nervous system is at. So beginning to recognize what that looks like and feels like in our bodies. So ventral vagus, social engagement, that's where we feel a quiet, relaxed energy. We feel a sense of connection. It feels easy and safe to connect with other people. We have some level of self-awareness and connection with ourselves. This ability to hear mid-range sounds is kind of interesting and probably a little more than we can get into, but if you've ever noticed, if you're extremely anxious or stressed and you have trouble comprehending or hearing what somebody says, this is kind of what's behind that. We feel embodied, we feel grounded, we feel present. Our system is normal heart rate, normal blood pressure, and this is where healing takes place. So it's where we want to be able to come back to when we don't need to be in one of these other defense states. You can go to the next. Okay. So then sympathetic, the fight flight state. This one is all about mobilization. So it's when we feel like we can't sit still, when we are fidgeting, when we have to when we feel like we want to avoid something, move away from something, when we feel like we want to fight, we feel aggressive. These are all signs of a fight flight state. And then everything kind of increases in our body, our blood sugar, our heart rate, our respiration. Um, we feel maybe anxiety, maybe anger, irritation. We might feel scattered. A lot of thinking, racing mind. Sometimes that can be behind people having trouble with sleep. When that mind won't stop spinning, that's because there's a level of sympathetic activation going on. Our digestion doesn't work as well. Um, and we might feel very tense in our muscles. And then there's the dorsal vagus. So that is the shutdown freeze state, and that's all about immobilization. So that feels very slow and foggy and like you just don't have the energy to do what needs to be done. Procrastination, putting things off. At a more extreme, it can be disassociation. You might have lack of boundaries. You might not be able to feel things as well, kind of numb. And also with this one, there's also decreased digestive function. So anytime there's digestive problems, there's probably something going on with the nervous system. So we can move. Okay. So what is nervous system dysregulation? So this is when the flow doesn't work as it's meant to. So Bonnie talked about the impala and how a predator came, it ran, it got caught, it went into dorsal, then it had an opportunity, it went back into sympathetic, ran away, shook it off, and then it was all good. It didn't hang on to anything from the past of what happened, unlike us. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The main one, which might be in the next slide, but the main one being trauma and co-regulative learning, what we learned from our caregivers. Because when we're babies and children, we are co-regulating with the adults in our life. And if our adult caregivers are not regulated, then we're not going to be. But it is something you can learn. It is something you can learn. But trauma is a big one that disrupts the normal flow of that because it's not like we want to always be in ventral vagus. That's not the point. The point is to be able to get back there when we don't need to be in a defense state. That's where the dysregulation comes from, or that is what dysregulation is. And you might see that in yourself and others as sleep issues, panic attacks, anxiety, depression. So anxiety is more that fight flight energy, depression's more of that dorsal energy, procrastination, which is a big struggle for a lot of people, and unexplained physical symptoms. So Bonnie's going to talk about
Speaking,
that.
speaking of symptoms, this was when I was learning about all of this. This was when I was starting to put things together. So, personal information here, my list here on the right of stuff that I have been dealing with through my life. Connecting that with the dorsal shutdown, um, typical things that are going on there was a huge thing for me. It's like, oh my gosh, this is why I'm dealing with this list of things is because I tend towards that dorsal vagus shutdown state. And so it kind of brought everything together for me and understanding that. And if you experience chronic illness, you might find that you line up with one of these defense states, that fight flight or the shutdown freeze state more. And understanding that can help you, well, first of all, that piece of self-compassion, understanding that there's not something wrong with you, there's something that's happened to you that's gotten you stuck in that. And that switch of understanding why you're there can be so important in your healing process. So from there, and should I go on, Kristi, because you already mentioned those?
I did. Yeah, we can go on.
Yeah.
So, trauma, it manifests in the energy body as unresolved or unintegrated survival energy. So, back to the Impala again, and Bonnie mentioning that it would shake off any, so it ran and it used some of that sympathetic energy. And if there was some left, then it would shake and process the rest of it. But how often do we as humans understand or have the opportunity and support to process that energy? I mean, think about just driving in crazy traffic. You're stuck. You're stuck physically behind a wheel with all this fight flight energy coursing through you. And then what do you do with it? Often nothing. It just kind of stays there. Okay, so your default state is the defense state that you tend to move into most often. So most people have one that is the one they kind of go to automatically when faced with a challenge or stress or a perceived threat. And it's important because it helps you once you know what it looks like, it helps you to recognize it. So that's the first key. That's what you have to do before you can really have any choice about any of it, is recognizing where you're at. So Bonnie created this awesome nervous system map that shows the road, and it shows the path from the safe and social in the green, feeling connected, and what that feels like. It has a series of I statements to help you recognize when you're there, although that's a lot easier to recognize, I think, than the others. But then going to fight, flight, and the red, and what that might look like and feel like, and then back down to the shutdown, freeze, immobilized. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but it's just a way to kind of help you identify. So as I'm talking here, if you kind of just skim through those and see if one of them resonates with you. So I can tell you that for me, if you can't tell by the speed with which I'm talking, I tend towards fight flight. That's my default. And Bonnie already mentioned that hers is shut down freeze. So it's good information to have about yourself.
Yeah.
So how can we learn to regulate our nervous system? If you only remember one thing, it's cultivating a felt sense of safety in your body. So again, this doesn't mean an intellectual understanding that you're safe. You could be sitting in your home at your desk. There's no intruders, there's no physical threat, but you are in a fight flight state, or you're in a shutdown state. You don't feel safe. Excuse me. So finding what can I cultivate in my life that's going to make me feel more safe. And one of the biggest is co-regulation. So having people in your life that you feel safe with and you feel like you can connect with. That is, I would say, one of the primary ways to cultivate safety.
Yeah. We're built for that.
We are
That
built for that.
that's how we are made to function. And pets can help with that too.
Yeah.
They're good.
And even online, because obviously everybody has different living situations and social circles and family situations. And then we all just went through the pandemic where we had a lot of physical distancing from each other. But connecting on Zoom has benefits. I mean, it's not the same as being physically present with somebody, but it does help.
Yeah.
So, just a little bit more about cultivating. We already talked about co-regulation, and um, I'm going to let you talk about cues of safety, Bonnie, but I'm going to jump down to the resource list, which if you want to create one for yourself, it's a really great way to remind you when you're in one of these defense states what you do to make yourself feel better. Because when we're in a defense state, our thinking brain is not working very well. So it's really easy to forget our tools, even if we have a whole basket full of them. So to have it written down someplace that you can look at it. I mean, I don't know how many times I've been in a state and then like it seems like it takes forever to think, oh, why don't I do that? Let me do that thing, you know? So it is helpful to have something in front of you. So it can be things like going for a walk, talking to a friend, writing in your journal. So whatever it is that makes you feel better, and it doesn't necessarily have to be healthy things, you know,
A pint of ice cream.
that's right. Sometimes it's binging Netflix, sometimes it's a glass of wine, you know, whatever it is to help you feel more nurtured and safe and secure.
Yeah. So coming back to cues of safety, when we're with people that we love and know that they love us, usually we're getting good cues of safety from them, and it's usually facial, actually, and largely the muscles around your eyes, actually, more than your smile. So, think about, the fake smile people put on for a picture. There's something wrong there, right? But when somebody's really smiling, it's moving to their eyes, and our nervous system is very highly attuned to what's happening in other people's faces, um, and it takes cues from that. So cues of safety can be connecting with someone that we know we can get that connection with. But it can also be just paying attention to our environment and taking in awareness of what's happening in the space that we're in. It can be music that feels familiar. Our brain loves things that are familiar. That's a cue of safety also. So a bunch of things that can work that way. So, but being aware of what brings a sense of safety into your body is important because we can use that when we need it. Um, so we have a little practice that we love. That's our favorite thing. And we wanted to take your listeners through that at some point. We don't need to do it right now. We can do it later if that works better. But that's what we've got for a sort of quick presentation for you. Emmy, what would you like to do?
Oh, I love it. Thanks. I just really appreciate all of the information and the resources and your knowledge. And it's funny, I I was like, I'm also really appreciating their pace, because in me, I'm like, I have to listen to things on fast forward or else I'll like go bananas. But it's like, well, know, receiving information at a gentle pace actually helps it line up a little bit more. So I just want to name that I also really appreciate the gentle aspect and the gentle quality that y'all bring, and that feels really good to just receive it. And
Thank
the
you.
awareness and the knowledge. So thank you. I think I love the idea of doing a practice and then maybe getting into a little bit of kind of like chit chat, question answer type things. Does that feel okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'd love to go through the practice.
Okay, awesome. I'll lead that. So we call this embodied scanning. So embodied and scanning. It's two, basically we're focusing on two things here.
Not
So we're
just
going
the
to start,
scanning.
yeah. So we're going to start with the body. So I want you to just take a moment and notice where your body is. Notice how your body is contacting the surface that you're on. Where does your body meet that? And if your feet are on the floor, feeling into that connection with the floor through your feet. So having that awareness of your body. Now I want you to open your eyes, and we're going to very slowly scan with our eyes the space that you're in. If there's a doorway, I like to trace the doorway with my eyes. Just letting that awareness come in. Looking up above you. Just being curious about what's there. And then turning to look behind you. And using your core muscles to turn. And then turning the other direction to look behind you. Noticing colors, shapes, making this playful and checking in with your body again, finding your body again. Noticing how it's sitting in the chair. And then I'm sitting at a desk, there's a table or a desk, looking underneath. Just being curious, what's here? If there's a window in the space that you can look out and see the outside, letting your eyes extend out to see what's out there. You can also trace around the window frame. And then coming back to your body again. And just noticing how that feels in your body. Now, do you notice any difference from where you were when we started with that? I notice a difference in my voice.
Mhm.
Like that, there's a drop in my voice. Actually, that is one of our cues of safety, is listening to the voice. Um, and our nervous system pays really close attention to what's happening with people's voices. Um, so that's one of the things that I noticed years ago when I was first receiving healing touch work. I get off the table and it's like I dropped an octave in my voice. Big difference in that. So
And I'd like to just comment about why this practice is effective, because it can seem kind of simple and like, oh, looking around, what does that do? But we're designed to kind of look around and be aware of our surroundings. But especially in our modern society, we don't do that a lot. If you think about phones and computers, we're we're looking very narrow and very close up a lot of the time. And so even though our minds know that we are safe, our nervous system does not. So giving it that input with our eyes and physically looking around and making it playful and really looking, not just scanning and not looking for danger either. You're looking for cues of safety, colors, shape, shadow, curiosity, all of that helps bring that felt sense of safety. And this practice is so effective. Bonnie and I have both had clients come out of panic attacks by doing this practice. So it can be deceptively simple.
Mhm.
And it's something you can use in a moment of distress, but it's also kind of a way of life and something that we would encourage people to just kind of make part of their daily routine, taking breaks to really look around their surroundings.
Yeah, it's how we're supposed to be functioning. And
Mm-hmm.
if you have pets, you watch your pets. Um, they do this. And not as much as wild animals, but they still do this. And that can be a cue for you. Oh, they're doing that. I should do that too. Um, but it makes your brain happy when it gets sensory information. And your nervous system, primarily it's visual that it's using, but it's also auditory. So I do a version of this where it's just listening and kind of the same process, being curious and wondering about what I can find with my ears, and get very much the same results. Our body loves it when we pay attention to what's the information that it's looking for. I call it, feeding your nervous system what it wants, and it'll calm down if it knows that you're doing that.
Yeah, I love that. And this is one of my favorite practices too. I love it. I have to kind of like really make myself do it though, because again, I'm like, I want to go fast. I want to scan it. I want to be done. This, that, and the other. Something kind of like popped into my mind when you were like holding your cell phone to your face, right? Like I'm wondering, and I I'm just wondering that like when we think about stress and we think about trauma, it puts us into these states. And I think what this practice is reminding of, we physically put ourselves into these states too, possibly. Like when thinking about how tunnel vision is a symptom of a sympathetic nervous system fight flight activated state. So if I'm actually like forcing myself into a tunnel vision, like I'm pushing my
Mhm.
body and my nervous system into that space of like hyper focus.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so really like remembering to come out of that space physically.
Yes,
exactly.
you're exactly right.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I want to say the vagus nerve it's not this magical thing that does all this stuff. It is nerve. It's sending information. Its job is to be a feedback loop. So 80% of the information is coming from your body up to your brain. Only 20% of what's happening on the vagus nerve is going from the brain down. But it's like you said, if we force ourselves into tunnel vision, it's going to send that cue to the brain that, oh, something's not safe here and I should be in this fight flight state because I'm doing this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that
But then
that feedback loop.
yeah, but the same way then with scanning your environment and making your vision long, that's feeding your nervous system the information that you're safe.
Right.
So yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you come to this work? How did you come to pay attention to the vagus nerve? And also maybe how did you guys come or how did you both come to each other? Because that you both seem to have such like this miraculous relationship. I love watching you talk. I love watching you teach because you're very respectful of each other and you flow. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just curious how you individually came to the vagus nerve and then maybe collectively came to it as well.
Well, I can speak to the coming to the vagus nerve stuff because that was um it's been on my radar for many years. And And then when I found polyvagal theory, it was like, this is it. I finally, I finally have this connection because I was at this point of, this is really important and it connects into all these things, but I don't understand how it works.
Mhm.
And so discovering polyvagal theory was huge for me. And then I got obsessed with it. And and Kristi and I shared office space off and on. We've known each other for, I don't know, at least 15 years.
Right. Well, we would have met in 2009 because we
Okay.
met when I was, or 2010, we met when I was pregnant. I had moved to
Oh,
Colorado in Fort Collins where she lives, and we were both healing touch practitioners. So that's how we connected. I, sought
mhm.
out other practitioners, and my daughter was actually in the NICU when she was born, and Bonnie came and did healing touch on her. So that was kind of the start of our relationship. And then, as she said, over the years, we shared office space with each other. And then I think it must have been 2017 or 18. Bonnie had the idea that we meet once a week to kind of support each other in our career goals and, hold each other accountable and bounce ideas off each other. So we started doing that. And that is when she was getting obsessed with polyvagal theory. And at the same time, I was working a lot with energetic boundaries and had developed a class for helping people to manage that and have stronger energetic boundaries. And so we were talking about our individual interest in work and realized through those conversations how polyvagal theory has the same principles really as energy work, just different language, and how they are kind of two sides of the same coin and how they work together. And I think the first class we did that combined the two things together was for kids, for
Mhm.
sensitive kids, because we
Mhm.
had so many parents as clients talking about the anxiety that their kids were dealing with and sensitivities and things like that. So that's how we started. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because we just work together really well.
We
And
do.
we're working on wording for stuff together and stuff and things and we just finish each other's sentences and
Mhm.
and we're well matched.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and I love Kristi. She's wonderful. So
Right
and
back.
she's very patient with me.
Uh,
But yeah, it just kind of fell into that and had really good responses from the families who took our sensitive kids class and we're like, you know what? As we're going into this more, it's like people need to know about this. And it's like, okay, well, putting together a local class is always challenging, getting people there and stuff. And we're like, you know what? It'd be way more efficient to teach other practitioners to get this out
Yep.
into the world.
Hmm.
They're the ones who are connecting with these people, and so that's where we decided we also developed a class for teens before that, but it was like, you know what, practitioners need to know about this. And it's going to help them in their practice because stuff happens when you're doing energy work that
Oh
you
yeah.
don't know where it's coming from. I've seen some things. And now knowing what I do, it's like, oh, I know what was going on when that happened. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And
And
I
so
think
it's really helpful for them, but also for their clients to get that.
yeah. And I think when you think about when you're coming out of that freeze shutdown state, you have to go through the fight flight. Like you have to.
Mhm.
It's like taking the emergency brake off of a car that's revving.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, there's no
yeah,
way out of that. And so if you have a client who has, even if they might not be in a shutdown state, if they are working through a memory that was in a shutdown state, there's still going to be that rev and that big release. And if
yeah,
we're reactive to that,
right.
talking about the middle ear, we can hear when someone's in a state of regulation or in a state of dysregulation, no matter what that person looks like. There is a part of us that senses where that person is at in their nervous system. And so if we're activated by our clients, their nervous system is going to know that we aren't regulated in that moment. And yeah. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Right. And if we can see what's going on and we can define it, then it's like, oh, okay, I know what's happening. I can hold space for this,
Yep.
for this person, and help them process that. And if they have support like that, if they have that empathetic witness who's there for them and supportive and offering co-regulation, they can move through it pretty quickly.
Mhm.
And that's how it should be. That's how it should be working. Um, but we haven't really known, so clearly what's going on and how to do that.
And you don't have to be a practitioner to do that for somebody either. You
Right,
can do
right.
it for your family members and your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We
Being
talk about empathetic witness. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to fix it.
Yeah.
You don't have to make them feel better. All you need to do is be there with them and accept whatever's showing up there and just staying with them. Literally being with them is a co-regulating, supportive experience for them. And it's not that hard once you understand, that you don't have to do something.
It's amazing. It like takes such a weight.
Right, right. I just need to be here. I just need to be there, and if you want to say to them, I'm staying with you, I'll just be here.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's, hold their hand if they want that. If it feels good, whatever. That's really all you need to do is just be with them and witness what they're feeling.
Yeah. It reminds me of, because I think a lot about the mammal brain, and I talk a lot about with clients. I'm like, we are way more mammal than we give ourselves credit to be. We're a pack animal. And we're also, I learned this from like a sleep consultant. We're carry mammals. Like we carry our young. Like we don't
Mm-hmm.
leave them, we keep them with us. And
Mm-hmm.
so for that type of mammal, perceiving that we are alone is a
Mm-hmm.
life-threatening condition.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
simply by being an empathetic witness, by being like, look, I'm here with you,
Mm-hmm.
you're taking that person's nervous system into this belief of like, I am not alone.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And that's kind of Peter Levine's definition of trauma is
Yeah.
being basically lack of empathetic witness, lack
Yeah.
of there being someone there for you.
Yeah, which I think from a physiological perspective makes sense. Like if our mammal brain takes over, it's responsible for our feelings. And when that comes into that play, like even thinking that we're alone, we can be in a crowd, but still
Mhm.
feeling alone, perceiving that we're alone, that's a life-threatening condition. And so so just having that presence of like, I have my empathetic witness, it puts me into connection and I am now safe.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's
Yes.
really
And
powerful.
sometimes we need to instruct other people to do that for us. I mean, I did that. I years ago hiking with my husband, and I slipped on something and fell hard. And he came running down. He wanted to yank me up off the ground, run me off the ground. I'm like, no,
Uh,
I need to sit here for a minute. And so I talked him through what I needed him to be for
Mhm.
me with that. And he was very good at following my instructions. But I healed up very quickly from that, more much more quickly than I expected.
Mhm.
And I think part of that was just that I got the support that I needed with that because, the typical, I don't know, American way is to, get up and shake it off and keep moving.
Yep.
Ignore that you got hurt. And that's not helpful. I have learned that giving some attention to and letting yourself be in pain for a few minutes actually helps with the healing process. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I think kind of like thinking about attention and like what we put our attention on, and I can't quite remember what was happening in the conversation, but it started to like feel really solid of like this idea of like paying attention. And I think that also kind of goes back to that like mammal brain of alone. So if we think of ourselves as parts, it's just like, I need that attention. Like I need the awareness because if I'm being, I don't know if bombarded is quite the right word, but we're constantly receiving information, energy, sights, whatever. And that constant reception can be very overwhelming if we're trying to push it away. And so giving ourselves the time and the spaciousness to allow it to come in and to recognize it as safe as opposed to something we have to push out that's like not safer.
mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of reminds me of like boundaries, which
Mm-hmm.
that's more Kristi's expertise, but that is so important. So maintaining a boundary is important, but that doesn't mean we don't feel anything, we don't let anything in. It's not a wall.
Yep.
Although in some ways it needs to be. You should talk about this, Kristi, not me.
Aw. Well, what you said about the pushing the information away, what that brought to mind for me was, being a highly sensitive person. So, which I kind of poo-pooed that for a long time. Like, oh, highly sensitive, whatever. But it's true. And that means for me that stimuli will feel like a danger to me because it is too much. Too much. And so that is a lot of times what I'll feel like, and that will definitely put me into a defense mode. But now that I understand, one, that that's how my nervous system is wired, and two, understanding polyvagal theory, I can take better care of myself, basically, and let the people around me know what's happening and take the sensory breaks that I need to let my nervous system calm down. No.
Yeah, I love it.
Mm.
Um, I have a few questions. Is it okay if I just ask a few questions?
Sure.
Okay, cool. This this comes out of this space of I feel like when people are kind of like forward facing like on podcasts or writing books or speaking, you always see like the good part, and I think like for people who might be struggling with chronic health issues or like gross husbands or anxiety or like whatever, it's like kind of like what's underneath that surface. And so I just really like to ask a few questions about like what's underneath the surface. And I think maybe my first question is, have you either struggled with any kind of like a chronic health condition or trauma or just really hard thing that you've kind of come out of or have found a way to either accept, work with, manage, and maybe about like how long did that take? That's yeah, is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. So, yeah, I've had many years of experience kind of going up and down through chronic illness and trauma and chronic stress. So, when I was previously married, it was a very difficult marriage, and I became quite ill, and I really didn't have resources within my house or really many outside of that. And I didn't know about polyvagal theory. I was an energy healer, so that did help. And I got some support that way. But, you know, it's challenging when you're continually in a stressful situation. It is very challenging to come out of it. I'm not going to lie about that. But there are things you can do to manage it. And I did somehow, before I left the marriage, mainly through energy work. I did a lot of physical stuff for my body, but honestly, it was mostly the energy work that popped me out of the illness enough that I could make the change that I did and left the marriage. But then shortly after that, I ended up in several court battles with my ex over my daughter. Um, and my health started to disintegrate again through that. And it was just pretty much daily um, kind of assault of danger signals. Like opening my email was traumatic. It was pretty bad. And you know, uh, I had gotten probably about 85% better with my health problems. And then things started to go downhill again. And I kind of just had to roll with it during the time because it was so intense. And I lost a lot of resources in a way. Like, for one thing, I had a lot of pain and I ended up using a cane. So, one of my main resources was being in nature and walking, and I really couldn't do that anymore. Another resource for me was reading. I've been a lifelong reader, and I just did not have the attention span to read a book. I went years without reading a book. So some of that stuff, kind of was gone, but one resource I had was Bonnie. In fact, we were making the Healing Through the Vagus Nerve class during the pandemic, which is during this time. So I was really struggling during that the making of that class and the first runs of it. But we would meet every week, at least, sometimes more than that, to work on the class, and we'd process usually my stuff. And the man who's now my husband also was so I had two really great co-regulative forces that I think kept my head above water. Um, so it's interesting, that I ended up in so much pain I could barely walk. And then it really wasn't until all of that was like done that I could start building my health again. And so that was in 2002, beginning of 2002, when everything kind of finally came to an end. And it probably took me about a year, honestly. And so, like, my hips, they have things that are actually wrong with them, like torn labrums and arthritis, and I'm going to need hip replacements eventually. But the orthopedic surgeon was like, you're in more pain than you should be looking at these scans, basically. And so he didn't want to do the hip surgery. He actually wanted me to get checked for autoimmune disorders, and I never got a diagnosis. But the hip pain did get better. I mean, now I can easily walk a mile, whereas, I mean, I couldn't even walk an eighth of a mile before that. So I guess my point is that the dysregulation and the toll the stress took on me was very evident, right? Like, okay, I still have damage to my hips, but now I can walk. Whereas before I was in so much pain, I couldn't walk. Um, and then, of course, we were learning or teaching about all of these techniques. So I used a lot of them just to kind of keep myself as stable as I could going through it all. But getting your environment or finding safety, because it's not realistic for everybody to get out of the stressful situation that they're in. Um, or at least not at that moment. So you just have to work with what you've got, and finding connection, I would say, is the biggest thing. Finding support somewhere is what's going to bring you through, I think, the most. And then honestly, embodied scanning, feeding my system safety as much as I could. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
But there is hope, definitely, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
I used to have really intense chronic lower back pain from an injury that I got during COVID and wasn't able to get
Mm.
appropriate care for. And then I started like sleeping with a really nice man, and it went away within And like I don't have it anymore.
Regulation.
Yeah. Yeah, our bodies are something. They're always giving us messages, you
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
And if we can remember that, because it can be frustrating, it really can. But what is my body telling me I need right now?
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
I really appreciate your honesty. Thanks.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have watched that experience, witnessed that, and Kristi's done amazingly at getting through. And I've got my own stresses too. Everybody has their own stresses and stuff that's going on, and I think it's just important to recognize that nobody's got it all together.
They do not.
and 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 we don't have to have it all together in order to be able to support other people,
Mhm.
or to be able to connect with people, or to be worthy of connecting with people. It's um, we're just because we're human, we are worthy to have connection
Mm.
with others, and we're all dealing with something and struggling with something, and understanding what's going on in our bodies and why we're experiencing things in our bodies certain ways, I think is just one of the most beautiful things about this work is being able to bring in that self-compassion of understanding, oh, no wonder I have all this tension up here. No wonder I'm experiencing this. No wonder my digestion is way off because I've been super stressed, and being able to bring in that self-compassion, um, it opens the door for taking care of ourselves, and being more aware and being able to say, okay, I'm not doing great. Where's my resource list? I need to go look at that because um, it's just so hard to think of these things when we're not in a good place,
Yeah.
because this goes
And it really,
offline.
yeah, and it really helps in families for
Mhm.
everybody to kind
Yeah.
of know and have like the nervous system map is a great tool because children can look at it. And if everybody in the family can start saying like, hey, this is where I'm at, like I'm really irritable right now, you know, you can, there's less defensiveness, there's less misunderstanding, there's less taking things personally, and there
Mhm.
can be more support.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I love that. This is where I'm at, like that's such that awareness. It's you talk
mhm.
about it in like 12-step recovery. It's the first step in nonviolent communication. It's like, where am I at right now? And
Yeah,
sometimes we can find it just by naming, like, oh, like I just yelled at my kid,
yeah,
but on the inside I feel fine. It's just like even like naming this is what's happening and
yes.
then going into and I think this is how I'm feeling because I definitely I'm prone towards that dorsal vagus shutdown and the disassociation. So it's like I don't hear my thoughts. I can barely feel anything. But then if I can name the behavior of like, oh, well, I'm having a hard time feeling things and my brain
Yeah.
feels empty, like, but yeah,
Mhm.
no, just offering that awareness of this is where we're at right now.
Yeah, and one of my cues is when I get impatient with my dogs, actually. Because usually I'm like, oh, babies, but if I'm just like, oh, for the same behaviors, then it's my cue to like, all right, what's going on, So whereas it used to be something that I had a lot of judgment around, like me being irritable, now it's my cue. What's happening? What do I need or what do I need to do differently?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm slowly taking this online course, and one of the first reframes they kind of said to use was instead of what's wrong, say what's happened. Like, oh,
Mhm.
so good.
Yeah, yeah, it is so good.
Mhm.
It is so good.
I think that there's a lot of judgment associated around how we behave. I think there's a lot of judgment associated around, well, I shouldn't feel like this or I shouldn't be like this. My parents never divorced and they had master's degrees. And as opposed to being like, what about like were people attuned? Like where's the attunement process? What's instead of coming into the space of curiosity of like, well, maybe I don't know what the story was, and maybe I'll never figure out what that story is, and that's okay. What I do know is I have these tendencies, like I can't be still ever, or I'm having a hard time getting out of bed, or kind of like dropping in and just really sitting with this idea of like, well, I might not never know what happened, but I can kind of figure out like what's coming up for me right now and how do
Yeah.
I meet it.
Yeah,
Well, it's
exactly.
kind of like being an empathetic witness for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is where I'm at, and I can be with myself, and it's
Yeah.
okay.
I kind of believe that there's no such thing as self-regulation. What we learn is how to co-regulate with ourselves.
Mm, mm,
Right? I mean that's when we're little, especially when we're first born, there is no self-regulation. There is no self-regulation. We regulate off of our caregiver, and that's how we learn to
Yes.
self-regulate. And yeah, and that's, understanding that it's so important. With infants don't have options. They don't, they may feel that sympathetic energy, that fight flight.
Mhm.
They can't do anything about it. They can't fight. They can't flee. They're completely dependent on their parents. So they drop into that dorsal shutdown.
Mhm.
That is, being quiet, being still is the best defense when you are defenseless
Mhm.
and you can't get away. So, Kristi mentioned the co-regulative learning, how we learn to regulate.
Yeah.
And so a lot of us learn to regulate by shutting down. And that's our go-to because that worked for us. That's what got us through
Yep.
when we were little.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has
mm.
been amazing. I really love talking to both of you and really appreciate this. Is there anything you want to name or say before we close? I would definitely love to hear how people can contact you, and we'll make sure that that information is linked. And then also, your course is starting. When does it start?
It starts March 18th.
Okay, cool. All right. And as someone who has taken the course, it is phenomenal. It has helped me as a practitioner. It's also just helped me as a human, as a parent. So it was deeply appreciative. But yeah, if there's anything besides contact info that you want to name or say before we close, I would love to just open up space for that.
Um, I think I just had this last thought about when you were saying sometimes you don't know why you feel the way you do, and I just want to um say that, yeah, that is the case sometimes, and that's okay. You don't always, sometimes you know why, if, and then you can kind of ask that question when you notice you're in some level of defense state and you ask the question, okay, what is happening right now? What triggered me into this? And maybe you don't know, but that's okay because you can still then use your resources, use your tools, find somebody to co-regulate with, and it builds in your system.
Mhm.
So it's not like it's just in that moment and then, it's a way of life and safety can be built in your system. So,
Yeah, thanks. I love that. Safety can be built. It's
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Bonnie, is there anything you want to name before we close?
No, that was perfect what Kristi said. Just want to say thank you for inviting us. This has been fun, and we really
Yeah.
appreciate the
We
opportunity.
we love talking about polyvagal theory. We're nerds.
I don't do online dating very well, but anytime I've ever had an online dating program, a profile, it's always been like I'm like a polyvagal nerd or like neuroscience nerd.
That's
Good
great.
plan.
I love
So, how
it.
can people get a hold of you if they want to know more about your work as healing touch practitioners, or if they want to know more about your class?
Well, the class, you can go to healingthroughthevagusnerve.com to learn more about that. And probably the best way to reach us is through email. And we'll give
Star
you,
Blossom, starblossomeducation at
um,
gmail.com. Yeah, that's our email.
yep, and
Or
that,
do you want you to give your website, Connie?
sure, I can. My website is healingtreewellness.com.
And
So
I'm retired from seeing clients. So I teach and I write. So yeah, I don't have a practice anymore.
I love that. Are you teaching healing touch classes?
Um, Technically, yes. I'm a level 1 instructor and I'm teaching this class and I'm
Oh,
doing a lot of writing. So,
what writing are you doing, if you don't mind my asking?
well, I write poetry, but I'm also working on a memoir. So,
she's a wonderful writer.
thank you.
Great stuff. Yes. Yeah, I love it.
Thank you. I have a Substack and everything.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Send me your Substack, please, and I'll make sure it's linked in the show. Okay.
Okay, I will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
would love. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure people would love that. Well, again, I just want to say thank you. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
Our
you're
pleasure.
welcome.
All right. As we close today's conversation, I invite you to sit with the wisdom shared by Bonnie and Kristi, allowing their kind, gentle, and compassionate words to resonate in your body and soul. The path of healing, of reconnecting to our roots, is one that requires patience, compassion, and the willingness to embrace the power of co-regulation and connection. Remember, as we journey together, we are always in the process of restoring ourselves to wholeness. Thank you for being part of this intimate exploration. Next time, we'll be joined by Benjamin Bernstein of Astro Shaman, who will offer insights into the transformative power of astrology and shamanism. We look forward to continuing this journey of growth, healing, and expanded awareness with you. Until then, I encourage you to find and connect with what you root into.